Donnie and Dolly. The team is supported by ableauctions.ca. Closing your business? We can help.
Just added Tony Gallagher. A reminder, our title sponsor is Able Auctions, ableauctions.ca. You had some information regarding the Canucks going into their game tomorrow night against Seattle, in Seattle.
Yeah, very quickly again, Brock Besser, Curtis Lazar heading to injury reserve. This is from Batch. These are the lines of practice. You got Garland, Horvat, Miller, Mikheyev, Pettersson, Kuzmenko, Pearson, Dries, Höglander, Joshua, Amon, Podkolzin. 7 defensemen were rotating through pairings as well at practice.
Yeah, Lockwood is the extra forward. Dries and Lockwood up from
Abbotsford
because of the injuries to Besser and Lazar that we just found out about.
Quickly, Kuzmenko moving up. What a smart move. He had one chance with playing with Amon. Get him back in the top 6. Good move.
Okay, looking forward to this. The Canucks started the season with 7 straight losses. In Seattle tomorrow, host Pittsburgh Friday. Somebody who always has an opinion on the Vancouver Canucks, BC Sports Hall of Famer Tony Gallagher. How are you, sir?
I'm very well indeed, and congratulations to you guys. You've rolled back the tombstone on me and allowed me out. I don't get on much anymore now, you know. I mean, and it's wise because I don't follow it nearly as closely, and I'm apt to make some odd mistakes. I mean,
never.
Maybe even significant mistakes. Who knows?
Well, Tombstone is perfect, Tony. Halloween's just around the corner. What do you make of what the Canucks are going through right now, Tony?
Well, we've seen it before. Maybe not quite this bad. The tradition here is not strong, and that's a problem. And I guess you got to start at the top with the Aquilinis, really. I mean, their inability to find successful management is quite amazing, and yet we know they can do it. I mean, they found it early on in their tenure as owners when they brought in Gillis and that crew, and they had a great success with altering the talent they inherited, improving it, taking a serious run at it, and then running back. And then I think the ownership panicked a little bit and moved Gillis out of there, and there was a lot of public heat on them. That was I think their first introduction to public heat ownership at the time, around 2014, 2015, whenever it was, and they panicked, and they have not recovered. I mean, the management crew they have is just a lot of grasping at straws and virtue signaling, and it's beginning to reflect on the ice. And you're looking at the product that they've put in front of you. You have a massive number of highly paid forwards that have achieved the square root of Sweet Fanny Adam, and yet they're all getting massive money. It's a tale of the Edmonton Oilers, really, early on, before they got McDavid, when you had guys like Nugent Hopkins and Jordan Eberle, and these type of players making massive amounts of money, and they'd scarcely, I don't know if they'd even made the playoffs at the time. And you see the same thing playing out here in Van, where you've got a ton of guys making a lot of money who have achieved nothing. I mean, if you take away that 1 year where 20 teams made the playoffs, and the Canucks made that little run during COVID, they've been out of the playoffs for 7 or 8 years. If you take that away from them now, they might have made the playoffs that year. There was a good chance they would. So it's a bit unfair to say that, but and they did make the best of 20 teams making the playoffs. But it has not been an illustrious run, and here they are playing Seattle on the in the next game coming up, and there's Jared McCann, a guy they traded along with a second-round draft pick, no less, for Eric Goodbranson, just to give you an indication of the kind of moves that were being made by said management teams.
Tony, what was your opinion, or what is your opinion of Jim Rutherford? What did you think when they first hired him, and what do you think now?
Well, the first thing I thought was, what on earth does Jim Rutherford want to come out here for? I mean, he's been sort of an Eastern guy all along. It's not nothing to do with East or West. Jim's a great guy, but he's getting a longer in the tooth, and I just don't understand these guys who wish to remain in hockey until their dying breath. And not that Jim does, and that might be a little harsh, but I just couldn't understand really why he wanted to come and take on another massive challenge. And let's face it, managing the Vancouver Canucks is a massive challenge. You have so many, I have sort of geographical strikes against you, the tradition, the fan base is impatient and been severely abused over the years. So I couldn't understand why. I mean, he was a good guy. He's a solid individual, and has a very good management record. But I just couldn't understand why he'd want to get involved here. And then he proceeded to, fill it up with people with very little experience in the NHL. I mean, Patrick Alvin's a rookie GM, as far as I know. I don't know whether he makes any decisions. Emily and Cammy, of course, are new to the business. And, Ryan Johnson's got some good young experience under his belt. I don't know much about Derek Clancy, but, Dale Talon, his senior advisor, I don't know what the senior advice has been so far, but I'm not too sure it's too thrilling. So, it's just, it's somewhat impoverished. I'm sure they're learning on the job and that, and maybe one day they'll all be extremely successful. And because they're all bright people. Cammy, I know, is really on the ball, So I'm sure she's getting her feet wet and getting in there into management, and she'll learn from this. But right now, there's a pretty high price to be paid.
Tony, ownership. Lots. We had some poll questions. A lot of heat on the owner in the city right now. Tony, your thoughts on Francesco Aquilini and the job that he has done since he's taken over? Well,
they have proven that they can bring in successful management, but since Gillis left, it's been dismal. Let's be clear. It's just not getting the job done, and I would suggest that the people whose advice they sought out at one stage are different from the people whose advice they sought out in a second stage, and they should take note of that. But, obviously when the Aquilinis go to make decisions, they need advice from people because their focus is business and real estate and all the other companies they have, and they've been monumentally successful doing it. But when it comes to hockey, they need advice, they need help, and where they go for that advice is crucial. And so far, the returns on where they've gone have not been highly successful. They haven't paid off very well. I'm sure they weren't great managements on the part of the Aquilini investment team.
Tony, the R word, rebuild, has been used a ton this week. He could have rebuilt in 2013 when Gillis asked him to. Linden asked him to in 2017. Would you do a rebuild right now, Tony?
Well, I don't know. There's no question that there's a tremendous imbalance in the team. They have all these forwards making all the money, and they don't have any defense. And the pressure that's being put on Demko is remarkable. Now they're scared to even play the other guy, although Spencer looks pretty good, if you ask me. Throw him in there and take some heat off Demko, but they need to win every game already in the first 10 games of the season. There's this huge pressure on everybody, so it's really a difficult situation. But the proof's in the pudding with respect to the ownership. The owners bear the responsibility for hiring the management team. It's a tough job. especially in Vancouver. But the proof is in the pudding, you know. What's their playoff? How many times have they appeared in the playoffs? Where are they now in the standings? There's your answer.
Yeah. Hey, Tony, sticking with ownership here, there's this thought that the Aquilinis or Francesco would rather have somebody, this is just a thought out there, somebody that listens to them versus somebody who can be extremely effective. From what you know, how much meddling is there from up top?
Well, you know, I have not been close in the last 5 or 6 years, so I would not dare to venture such a comment at that point. I mean, in the last 6 years, I have no idea. But earlier on, there was some, certainly after the loss in 2011, I think there was a real push from ownership to go away from the speed and skill that Gillis was trying to do and had successfully done. Let's face it, in 2011, the Canucks were so far the best team in the league, it was ridiculous. And what happened in the final, I mean, they ran out of bodies, and it was a tough blow for everybody. But after that, I think there was some meddling. There was a push to make the team tougher. And
like
maybe
Boston,
at the expense of speed and skill at the time, that where the league was going to more speed and skill. However, you do need some muscle and you do need some toughness to win, because usually the final 4 teams, 3 of the 4 final teams have that component in their lineup. And lately with the Lightning and I guess the Avs as well, they have not had much of that component. But up until just recently, the speed and skill teams have been kind of pushed around when it got down to the nitty-gritty. So I could see their willingness or their desire to get a little more toughness in the lineup. And I think the management realized they wanted a little bit of that too after 2011. But there was some meddling at the time. In the last 6 years, I have no idea.
Before we let you go, Tony, Brussels sprouts, they now fry them and put various sauces on them. They're absolutely delicious. Have you changed your opinion on the Brussels sprout?
Well, not really. And I'd like to know if Bob Marjanovic is still alive, because he loved Brussels sprouts. And they might have done him in by now, but I know Mo just fine. But, you know, they were not my favorites. They continue to remain not my favorites. And I have to say that not one has passed my lips since I've been making my own dietary decisions.
Oh.
And anyone who knows how old I am would realize that that is quite a lengthy stretch of time. So I really don't know what goes into Brussels sprouts these days. Don't even know what they taste like. Perhaps they've evolved over 60 years or something and are now quite tasty. But they are not in my dietary repertoire, shall we say.
Thanks so much for this, Tony. By the way, what are you up to these days?
Well, I should lodge a complaint that Don Taylor isn't in the BC Sports Hall of Fame.
Oh!
For certain. And I can think of a few other names, certainly the ones that Dolly was mentioning.
Thank you.
Earlier in the show, and he can repeat those names. And I'd also add Al Davidson. Now, I know
Al
he'll probably
great.
never get in
Yeah.
because of the things he used to say in the politically correct environment. They'd probably glue themselves to the BC Sports Hall of Fame if that were the case. But he certainly deserves to be in because he dominated radio.
Yes, he
You
did.
could not miss an Al Davidson sportscast.
Yeah.
And yet it's funny, like when Dan goes in yesterday, and congratulations to Dan. Like I was thinking about this when you guys were mentioning earlier. I hope I'm not going overtime.
No, that's okay.
No, go ahead.
Trying to gas me here, but or move along anyway. But I hardly ever heard Dan's show. You know, when I was working, you're either on the road. It's game night in Vancouver. When I've been on the road as much as I was, And I got a night at home. I sure wasn't listening to the radio at home with my wife and kids, and not like the kids were up that late. And then the only time I ever heard Dan's show was in my car, not coming back from a hockey game, because I would listen to the broadcast post-game show on the way home after writing, and that was right at the tail end of it. So I hardly ever heard it.
Yeah, well, a lot of people did, and a lot of people listened.
I know they did.
A lot of people listened to Al Davidson, and everybody read you in the province, Tony. You know that.
Tiger Al was a legend, no doubt about that.
As you are, Tony. You know I love you.
Oh well, our Dolly Wall, there's no one like him. I'm telling you, nobody lights up a newsroom like this guy. Having him around is such a blessing.
Yeah.
At the team, it was a blessing. He kept everyone loose. He and Dave Pratt at each other. Always on them, and good memories.
I got to write a book. Tony.
Yeah, Tony. Thanks so much for this, Tony. All the best. Just great having you on. We'll do it again soon. Thank you, Tony Gallagher, Hockey Hall of Famer.